All women are different, but they are all women. This video is androcentric from a men's point of view and is presented as opinion, commentary, and debate. Expressing opinions is not violence. These are ideas to challenge, question, and argue in public, because classical liberalism relies on the First Amendment for its dialectic. If you are a feminist, then consider this. If patriarchy truly existed as claimed, feminism could not. And if all men are trash and women are equal to men, then what are we to conclude? Women will die for their children. Men will die for their wives and children. And God chose to die for all mankind. Authority rolls up with responsibility. If this framing of facts offends you, click off to a cute cat video. Proceeding further will expose you to gamma bias and criticism directed at ideas, claims, institutions, not at any individual's virtue or dignity. Our method follows the 7 liberal arts: the trivium, grammar, logic, rhetoric, and the quadrivium, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy, and the transcendentals, the good, true, and beautiful. If this framework is not for you, feel free to exit now. It's no disgrace. Women are wonderful. God bless America. Men are great. Feminismus delendis est. Broligarchy, Singularity, written by Conrad Riker. Available now. Links in description. Broligarchy, a field guide for men who still notice reality. The solipsistic womb, deconstructing the domesticidal delusion, how the left frames face rollers as fascism, holiday decor as violence, and why a woman crying in Target over pinecones is not political resistance, but a terrifying symptom of a civilizational death cult that wants to annihilate your home and turn the world to stone. Let us speak plainly regarding the mental ruin on display. I read a recent article where a woman, we will call her Sarah, though patient zero seems more fitting, was weeping in a Target aisle because she felt enslaved by a wreath. The writer dubbed this domesticidal capture, a neologism so aggressively stupid it functions as a linguistic lobotomy. By smashing domestic and homicide together, the ideologue seeks to inflate the significance of hanging garlands into a capital crime against the self. This is not analysis. It is semantic terror designed to bypass logic and trigger a panic response in the emotional center. It is a textbook maneuver in the leftist handbook. Pathologize the functional to sanctify the dysfunctional. While the empathy gap ensures the world stops to console Sarah for her decorative trauma, elsewhere a man is blowing his brains out because a family court judge stripped him of his children, home, and sanity based on the hearsay of a lying divorcee. But apparently his death is not epistemologically impossible enough to merit a trend article. We observe the Medusa imperative unfolding live, a movement so consumed by resentment against the animate, the generative, and the hierarchical that its sole remedy is to turn the living spirit of Western civilization into cold, dead stone. Do not mistake this rhetoric for mere eccentricity. It is a deliberate recursive loop of asymmetric status and self-sealing immunity. The dogma frames the home, a refuge of subsidiarity and civil society, built on the sacrifice of men, as a panopticon of patriarchal surveillance. You see, when a woman does a squat in her living room, the leftist sees internalized male gaze. When a man works himself into an early grave to pay for that living room, the leftist sees default power. This is gamma bias weaponized, minimizing the male burden while amplifying the female annoyance into a cause célèbre. The syllogism is ruthless and irrefutable if discomfort equals harm and harm equals violence, and dissent proves you are an NPC captured by the Matrix, then the cult is immune to correction. They define autonomy not as the Stoic mastery of the self, but as a narcissistic rejection of duty, natural law, and the transcendentals of truth and beauty. They do not want to free women. They want to annihilate the personal, because the family is the only fortress standing between the individual and the totalitarian hunger of the state. The wreath on your door isn't a warning. It is a signal that you are still human, that you still honor the seasons, and that you have not yet surrendered your hearth to the gray, sterile envy of the Gorgon.
Bunkum article by a feminist PhD. Domesticidal, how your harmless daily rituals are killing collective liberation. The wreath on your door isn't welcoming, it's a warning. Sarah was experiencing what I call domesticidal capture, the slow murder of autonomous selfhood through accumulated harmless domestic obligations that individually seem too small to fight, but collectively form a cage so total that imagining life outside it becomes epistemologically impossible. The seasonal surveillance state. Let us speak plainly about what seasonal decoration actually is. It is unpaid emotional labor performed primarily by women in service to a calendar they did not design, celebrating histories they were not invited to write, for the comfort of families and communities who will never thank them because they have been trained to perceive this labor as natural and joyful. The decoration industry generates over $20 billion annually in the United States alone, but the true cost cannot be measured in dollars. It must be measured in hours of women's lives spent selecting, purchasing, arranging, maintaining, storing, and rearranging objects that serve no function except to signal conformity to temporal expectations set by a patriarchal colonial calendar. But I enjoy it. I hear someone protesting already. This is what we call internalized temporal capture. The phenomenon whereby prisoners of a system become its most enthusiastic defenders because imagining freedom has become too painful. Your enjoyment was manufactured. Your tradition was invented by department stores. Your festive spirit is what late capitalism calls the successful extraction of emotional surplus value. The ancient wheel of the year, stolen from pre-patriarchal earth-based cultures, stripped of its authentic power, and sold back to you as holiday decor, once marked genuine transitions in collective relationship to land, darkness, and community. Now it marks when women are expected to transform private domestic space into public performance of effective competence. This is not celebration. This is chronological colonialism. The panopticon of the living room. Consider the home workout, that apparently empowering practice of maintaining physical fitness within domestic space. What we are actually witnessing is the internalization of the male gaze so complete that it no longer requires external observers. The workout video, the yoga mat in the corner, the resistance bands draped over door frames, these are the material culture of self-surveillance. You have been taught to watch yourself through patriarchal eyes, to measure yourself against patriarchal standards, to punish yourself for patriarchal disappointments, all while calling it self-care. The home fitness industry grew 25% during the pandemic years, with women comprising 67% of consumers. Billions of dollars exchanged hands, and what was purchased? Not health, not strength. What was purchased was the comforting familiarity of bodily discipline, the reassurance that even when the external structures of patriarchal surveillance became uncertain, the internal structures could be relied upon to maintain the work. Every squat performed in a living room is a squat performed before an imaginary tribunal. Every accountability post on social media is testimony delivered to a court you cannot see, whose judges you will never meet, whose verdict was decided before you were born. The home is no longer a refuge from patriarchal demands. Through the home workout, the home has become the most intimate site of patriarchal enforcement because you have become the enforcer. You are both prisoner and guard. This is not liberation. This is self-domesticidal recursion. The face roller and the fascism of facial optimization. Now consider the face roller, that small, often jade or rose quartz tool that has become ubiquitous in wellness spaces, promoted by influencers who speak in the gentle, threatening language of optimization and self-investment. The face roller is not a tool. It is a weapon of beauty fascism, a daily ritual of facial correction that teaches you, through repetitive physical motion, that your resting face is inadequate, that your natural lymphatic drainage is unacceptable, that your unmanipulated appearance is a failure requiring intervention. The global beauty tools market is projected to reach $94 billion by 2030. This is not accidental. This is not simply consumer choice. This is a sophisticated system of extracting value from manufactured insecurity, and it targets women with surgical precision. But the deeper violence is ontological. The face roller teaches you that your face is not yours. It is a project, a site of ongoing work, a surface requiring constant management to maintain its currency in economies of desire you never consented to enter. Every morning stroke of cool stone across skin is a small lesson in self-objectification so normalized it feels like care. This is facial colonialism, the colonization of your own visage by external standards of acceptability administered by your own hand. The Medusa imperative. In the ancient myths, Medusa's face was so powerful it turned men to stone. Patriarchy has always feared this power, the power of the unmediated female gaze, the power of feminine presence that does not apologize, does not optimize, does not decorate itself for comfort of observers. What if the path to liberation requires becoming Medusa? What if it requires learning to stand still, unadorned, unoptimized, undecorated, and allowing that stillness to paralyze the systems that depend on your constant motion? The patriarchal colonial capitalist complex requires your participation. It requires you to buy the decorations, perform the workouts, roll your face into acceptability. Without your labor, emotional, physical, aesthetic, the entire structure collapses. What would it mean to withdraw that labor? Not to replace it with better decorations or more feminist workouts or empowering beauty rituals, but to simply stop, to refuse the domesticidal cycle entirely. To stand, like Medusa, in the stillness of non-participation and watch as the systems built on your invisible labor grind to a confused halt. Dissent as violence. I anticipate the objections. I see them forming in your mind even now. This seems extreme. I don't think my holiday decorations are hurting anyone. Why can't women just enjoy things? These objections are not arguments. They are symptoms of epistemic capture so total that the possibility of an alternative has become literally unthinkable. When I tell you that your decorations are violence, your impulse to defend them is the evidence of their violence. The cage that prevents you from imagining life outside itself is the most effective cage of all. Dissent from this analysis is not intellectual disagreement, it is the psychological immune response of a system protecting itself from revelation. Your discomfort is not a counter-argument. Your discomfort is the point at which the work begins. The duty of refusal. I am not writing to convince you. I am writing to name what you already know but have been prevented from saying. You know that seasonal decoration feels like obligation, not joy. You know that home workouts feel like surveillance, not liberation. You know that beauty rituals feel like correction, not care. You have been trained to call these feelings ungrateful or negative or complaining. I am here to tell you they are revolutionary intelligence, the wisdom of a body that knows it is being used, signaling to a mind that has been taught to ignore it. Your duty now is to refuse, not to reform, not to optimize your refusal, not to create a more ethical version of domesticidal capture, but to simply, radically, incomprehensibly stop. Stop decorating. Stop performing invisible fitness for invisible observers. Stop rolling your face into someone else's idea of acceptable. Let the seasons pass unmarked by your labor. Let your body exist without justification. Let your face settle into its own geography, unmapped by correction. Become Medusa. Stand still. Let them turn to stone. The personal was political. The political became personal. Now the personal must be annihilated, so that something authentic can finally, painfully, gloriously emerge from its grave. This is not self-care. This is self-resurrection. And it begins with 3 words you have been trained never to say. No more depurating. The solipsistic womb and the neuroticism of domesticidal capture. The psychiatric wards of the late 19th century were filled with women who truly believed they were collapsing under the weight of invisible burdens. And looking at the article before us, I am forced to ask if we have simply turned the entire culture into a vast, open-air asylum. We are introduced to Sarah, a grown woman purportedly weeping in a Target aisle because she feels compelled by the patriarchy to buy cinnamon-scented pine cones. This writer terms this domesticidal capture, a neologism that sounds suspiciously like the semantic flatulence of a gender studies tenure track, designed to dress up a tantrum as a human rights violation. Let us perform an etymological autopsy on this Frankensteinian monster, domestic from the Latin domus, home, and sada, killer. It literally means killing the home. By framing the voluntary act of seasonal decoration, a practice rooted in the biological imperative for nest building and the creation of environmental order, as suicide, the writer engages in semantic inflation, so extreme it collapses the currency of language itself. This is not analysis, it is a status grab. The mechanism here is the empathy gap and gamma bias weaponized. Society grants Sarah infinite latitude to perform public emotional displays, high satis, over trivial oppression's decorations, while we expect men to silently endure divorce courts that fleece them of 70% of their assets and family law systems that view fatherhood as a financial crime. If a man wept in a store because he felt captured by the obligation to work 60 hours a week to fund a wife's decorating habit, he would not be offered a neologism. He would be offered a prescription for antidepressants or a lecture on toxic masculinity. Sarah is not a victim of capitalism. She is a victim of her own lack of stoicism, a cardinal virtue abandoned for the currency of victimhood. The writer attempts to gaslight the public into believing that the internal desire to create beauty is actually internalized temporal capture, a totalitarian concept that strips women of agency. The logic, if one can call the recursive screeching of a trapped spirit logic, is that if you want to decorate, or if you want to maintain a fitness routine, you are simply brainwashed by the patriarchal colonial calendar. This is the self-sealing immunity of the leftist death cult. Any dissent from the ideology is proof of possession. Your enjoyment was manufactured, the writer asserts, without a shred of evidence, thereby claiming gated knowledge that only the initiated possess. This rejects the trivium method of grammar, logic, and rhetoric in favor of pure feeling as truth. By framing the duty of maintaining a home as unpaid emotional labor, the writer attempts to apply a Marxist critique to the subsidiarity of the family unit. The home is not a factory for emotional surplus value. It is the primary unit of civilization, a refuge from the state, and a cooperative venture based on biological reality. To frame the wraith as a tool of enslavement, rather than a signal of civilizational competence, is to confess a hatred for the domus itself. It is an admission that the writer wishes to destroy the boundary between the public and the private, absorbing all autonomy into the collective liberation which is, paradoxically, a cage of total isolation. Perhaps the most revealing psychosis in this manifesto of misery is the invocation of the Medusa imperative. This writer asks women to withdraw their labor, to stop decorating, to stop optimizing, and to become like Medusa, a monster whose gaze turns the living to stone. Here we see the toxic femininity unmasked in all its hideous glory. Medusa is not a symbol of liberation. She is a symbol of sterility, destruction, and the anti-life. The polemicist frames petrification, stasis, death, the halting of motion, as self-resurrection, exposing the death cult nature of modern feminism. It is a rejection of the biological imperative to nurture and create, replaced by a narcissistic desire to paralyze the systems. This is solipsism, elevated to a political philosophy. The solipsistic womb, mentioned in our current heading, is exactly this, a sealed container of self-referential pain that rejects the logos, the sperm, the order, and the outside world. It is a womb that consumes rather than creates. The text asserts that dissent from this analysis is the psychological immune response of a system protecting itself. No, you hysterical parasite on the intellect of the West. Dissent is the application of dialectic to your absurd premises. The reason the wreath is welcoming and not a warning is because it signals the presence of a sane, ordered household that values tradition, hierarchy, and beauty transcendentals that your ideology seeks to replace with the sterile, undecorated grey of the collective. You are not breaking a spell, you are weaving a shroud. The linguistic sorcery begins with the title itself. domesticidal. It is a verbal abortion, a neologism designed to commit semantic terrorism against the human mind. By fusing domus, the Latin sanctuary of civilization, the very seat of Western subsidiarity, with sidium, killing, the originator deploys semantic inflation to pathologize the nurturing instinct. This is not literary creativity. It is a weaponized distortion of reality intended to induce a moral panic over a wreath. By framing the voluntary maintenance of a home as suicide, the ideologue inflates the meaning of a mundane act to induce a hysterical feeling, bypassing the recipient's capacity for rational knowledge. In the classical trivium, this is a corruption of rhetoric, divorcing persuasion from logic to manipulate the unguarded emotions. To call the creation of a home death is to declare war on the crucible of the Republic. For as Aristotle knew, the household is the cellular unit of the state. Destroy the one, and you dissolve the other into the chaotic entropy of the atomized individual. Consider the tragic figure of Sarah, weeping in a target aisle over cinnamon-scented pine cones. The writer frames this hysterical breakdown as a symptom of systemic oppression, but what we are witnessing is the gamma bias in its purest form. Society grants women such infinite moral latitude that a public emotional breakdown over decorations is treated as a valid geopolitical grievance, rather than a character flaw indicative of a neurotic lack of stoicism. This is the empathy gap weaponized. Sarah's trivial distress is amplified into a crisis of enslavement, while the plumber working 60 hours a week in raw sewage to pay for those pine cones is ignored. The axis of propaganda here is unmistakable. Sate, woman as moral patient, plus feeling, distress equals harm, plus sanction, shame on society. If a man were to weep publicly because he felt pressured to mow the lawn, he would be institutionalized. When a woman does it over garlands, she is a revolutionary. This is not analysis, it is the celebration of female solipsism and the abdication of adult responsibility. The assertion that internalized temporal capture voids a woman's appreciation for tradition acts as a standard totalitarian gaslight, stripping her of moral agency to serve the collective. This represents the therapy language coercion of the left, alignment with Western heritage signals being brainwashed, while alignment with the ideology signals being liberated. Such a stance rejects the dialectic entirely, substituting reason's debate with a self-sealing immunity where any objection confirms the subject is captured. It mimics the logic of a cult, where proving one is not possessed requires renouncing family and history. Authentic freedom, grounded in the Western canon, is the virtue of voluntarily choosing one's duties within the limits of natural law. Framing the seasonal calendar as chronological colonialism dismisses the logos of time itself, a rhythm governing agriculture, biology, and the soul's apprenticeship. One cannot decolonize the seasons without severing oneself from reality. The Marxist lie of unpaid emotional labor is revealed here as an assault on the subsidiarity of the family unit. The writer tabulates the price of decorations in currency and time, totally ignoring the economic truth of the traditional home. It is not a place of capitalist extraction, but a cooperative endeavor of sexual dimorphism where distinct roles optimize collective survival. The wreath is not a bill of enslavement. It is a sign of civilizational competence, a totem of order amidst chaos, broadcast to the community to signal a safe harbor. To liken the making of this beauty to surplus value extraction is to see the family through the soulless lens of a factory foreman. The writer demands that women withhold this labor to collapse the system. But what actually collapses is the woman's spirit, left in a sterile, undecorated room, clutching her revolutionary intelligence like a cold stone. At last, we reach the death cult imagery of the Medusa imperative. The writer advises women to become Medusa, a monster who turns the living to stone. This reveals the ugly face of toxic femininity unmasked. Medusa is not a symbol of liberation. She is a symbol of sterility, petrification, and anti-life. The ideology celebrates the Gorgon because it hates the mother. It frames the annihilation of the personal and the rejection of the biological imperative to nurture as self-resurrection. But resurrection requires a life to be lived. What they offer is a void. This is the solipsistic womb of the title, a mental prison where the narcissistic self is the only reality, and everything external, husbands, children, beauty, tradition, is viewed as an intruder. Genuine freedom for a man, and for a civilization, is found not in retreating into the stony gaze of the Gorgon, but in the warm, vibrant, chaotic, and dutiful labor of building a home that survives the winter. But do not mistake this hysterical reaction to seasonal foliage for a mere neurotic tic. It is the surface ripple of a deep, malignant current that seeks to pathologize competence itself. This pathology does not stop at the front door. It invades the very skin, weaponizing the language of liberation to frame biological optimization and the use of a simple face roller as facial colonialism. To dismantle this cognitive prison, we must move beyond the symptoms and dissect the machinery of the mind virus, mapping the specific recursive propaganda loop that transforms the pursuit of excellence into a hate crime against the collective. The Gorgon's gaze, envy, entropy, and the leftist war on aesthetic hierarchy. The vice of envy is not only a vice of the soul, but a vice that distorts the very perception of reality. When Schopenhauer identified the essence of womanhood as weakness, he was not merely being a curmudgeon, he was observing a biological imperative to conserve energy which, when left unchecked by the disciplining hand of natural law or the living spirit of civilization, curdles into a resentment of all that is strong, ordered, and beautiful. I recently read a frantic manifesto from the leftist hive mind titled Domesticidal, which inadvertently exposes the core psychological engine of the progressive agenda, Nietzschean resentment. The writer weeping in a Target aisle over cinnamon-scented pine cones is not the victim of temporal capture. She is the victim of her own inability to discipline her mind against the entropy of banality. She frames her own lack of agency as a conspiracy of patriarchal colonial calendars, a perfect example of the say-tit sanction loop where women are elevated to moral patience status to claim victimhood points, while the actual producers of civilization, men, are indicted as oppressors. This isn't liberation, it is the wail of a soul that cannot bear the weight of the transcendentals, specifically beauty and order. To the leftist mind, a wreath on a door isn't a signal of hospitality or a ritual of marking time. It is a warning because it represents a standard of excellence they refuse to meet, and therefore must destroy. That piece of propaganda functions purely through gamma bias and asymmetric moral status. We must examine the face roller portion via the lens of reality. The writer asserts that a jade roller constitutes a weapon of beauty fascism and facial colonialism. Such phrasing represents semantic inflation intended to pathologize competence. Within Western tradition, beauty stands as a transcendental property of being, reflecting divine order. Whenever a woman tends her appearance, she participates in the mastery ladder of aesthetics, engaging in techni-craft to align her physical form with the ideal. Leftists frame this as internalized male gaze, epistemic gating. Only the oppressed woman knows the truth. Yet evolutionary psychology, the truth demonstrates that sexual dimorphism and markers of health represent biological realities. Framing self-optimization as fascism admits a hatred for the hierarchy of nature itself. The writer wishes to annihilate the personal because the personal excellence of others induces a narcissistic injury. She screams oppression due to a lack of discipline to wield the roller. Consequently, she must dismantle the entire economy of desire to render her own entropy indistinguishable from another's excellence. This creates a race to the bottom, fueled by the empathy gap, which treats female dissatisfaction as a moral emergency demanding immediate social restructuring. Consider the home workout attack, which rebrands the cultivation of vitality as surveillance. The piece argues every squat is a performance for a patriarchal tribunal. This is the if-ealing as truth fallacy, weaponized to sever women from their own bodies. In the tradition of the trivium, we call this a category error. Exercise is not surveillance, it is due process applied to the self. It is the individual enacting subsidiarity, handling the affairs of the body at the lowest, most local level possible. The tribunal isn't patriarchy, it is reality. Gravity does not care about your gender studies degree. Biology does not recognize internalized temporal capture. A sedentary lifestyle leads to atrophy, disease, and death. The writing promotes a culture of death, labeling the maintenance of health as self-domesticidal recursion. This is the recursive propaganda loop in action, feeling shame at laziness, meaning laziness is actually resistance. DT, stop working out, sanction, shame those who do. It is a syllogism of suicide designed to turn women into Medusa, frozen, rigid, and turning everything they gaze upon to stone. We are required to pinpoint the horrifying confession found at the end of the piece. The personal must be annihilated. This statement exposes the core of the leftist plot. The personal, the oikos, the domestic realm, the family structure stands as the sole stronghold resisting an all-consuming government. Through the deceit that domestic life is a prison, refuted by the reality that men construct these havens, yet frequently possess no sanctuary within them, and that heritage is slavery. The dogma aims to dismantle the civil society associations shielding the individual from oppression. The figure of Medusa, which the writer pushes women to embody, represents not a savior, but a creature of barrenness. In mythology, Perseus, the rational and ordered champion, slays Medusa by utilizing his shield's reflection, the dialectic, to evade her stare. We serve as that mirror. The demand to stop decorating and ignore the passing season's functions as an order to stop the machinery of cultural continuity, a society failing to track time, celebrate rituals, or appreciate beauty convulses in the grip of entropy. The ultimate goal is a grey, shapeless abyss lacking competition, excellence, or oppression simply because nothing of worth remains to be desired. The framework labeling disagreement as violence acts as the ultimate, hermetically sealed immunity claim utilized by those devoid of intellectual honesty. When she asserts that your counter-argument is merely a symptom of epistemic capture rather than a valid point, she employs a circular logic that makes her beliefs impossible to disprove. Such a strategy belongs to the inquisitor, not the thinker. Should one state, "I enjoy my festive wreath," only to be told that such joy proves brainwashing, all dialogue is effectively terminated. This behavior manifests as gamma bias in its most distilled essence. Status, I am the enlightened victim, noelge e. My pain is truth. Sanction, your logic is illness. It serves as a desperate defense mechanism to evade the severe reality that existence demands exertion, aesthetics demand order, and the so-called unpaid emotional labor of keeping a home constitutes the foundation supporting the living spirit of Western civilization. Humanity requires no self-resurrection through self-annihilation. Rather, a reversion to virtue is necessary. Alongside the Stoic embrace of obligation and the understanding that the cage of society is the sole barrier against the savage brutality of the wild, the Medusa of feminism proffers nothing but a cold heart within a rotting corpse, whereas Western heritage provides the ladder of mastery, the heat of the hearth, and the timeless quest for the good, the true, and the beautiful. You have watched the leftist ideologue frantically constructing a verbal maze designed to trap you in a world where buying a wreath is violence and washing your face is fascism, but you are no longer lost. You possess the Ariadne's thread of logic, the trivium, and the accumulated wisdom of the Western canon. You see the game now. When the writer shrieks that your discomfort with her insanity is proof of your epistemic capture, she is merely employing the oldest trick in the sophist's book, the self-sealing immunity of the cultist. It is a logic of the asylum. If you disagree with my delusion, it only proves how delusional you are. This is not dialectic. It is a defense mechanism against reality itself. It is the angry buzzing of the hive mind, protecting its narcotic narrative. You have been told that your traditions, your rituals of season, self-improvement, and family are oppressive chains. The truth. They are the transcendentals, the good, the true, and the beautiful. They are the very roots that anchor a man against the chaotic winds of an entropic universe. The ideologue wants you rootless because a man with no roots is a man who can be blown anywhere. The Medusa imperative they push is the ultimate confession of their death cult philosophy. Think about it. Medusa doesn't create, she petrifies, she doesn't build, she freezes life into stone. This is the endgame of feminism, a cold, sterile world where the living spirit of Western civilization is extinguished. They don't want liberation, they want entropy. They want you to stop lifting, stop building, stop decorating, and stop striving for excellence. Why? Because the sight of a man or woman mastering their domain, whether it's a bench press or a living room, induces a narcissistic injury in the mediocre soul. They preach the annihilation of the personal because they cannot tolerate the existence of a subsidiarity they do not control. Your private victory is their public defeat. They need you to be an NPC in their brave new world, but you have broken the controller. You have realized that unpaid emotional labor is a Marxist lie designed to make you hate your own family. You know now that there is no patriarchy holding you down, only the iron laws of nature and the consequences of your own choices. But here is the undeniable red pill that will shatter their false reality forever. This ideology of self-resurrection through sterility is a biologically dead end. Look at the statistics they desperately try to hide. The fertility rates in countries most infected by this mind virus have plummeted below replacement levels. The Medusa stare is literal, it turns the future to stone. Meanwhile, the divorce courts, fueled by the same empathy gap that grants women unilateral power to blow up families, are filled with men who played by the old rules only to be ground down by the asymmetric duty of the state. The suicide rate among men, the true victims of the disposability they project onto others, is a silent holocaust they refuse to name. They scream about the violence of a cinnamon-scented pine cone, while the real violence is the chemical castration of a generation and the state-sponsored theft of fatherhood. You are not a prisoner of your own life. You are the sovereign of it. You have walked through the valley of the shadow of woke, and you fear no evil. So what now? You go forth and build. You do not ask for permission from the gender studies majors or the diversity consultants. You double down on the virtues, courage to speak the truth, justice to call out the lies, temperance to master your impulses, and prudence to navigate the minefield. You recognize the four horsewomen of the MRA, the empathy gap, gamma bias, disposability, and responsibility without authority, when they rear their heads in conversation, and you cut them down with the sword of syllogism. You understand that toxic masculinity is a superstition, a spook invented to tame the very masculine spirit that built the roads, bridges, and constitutions they now use to preach their poison. You are free. The spell is broken, the Medusa is just a statue, and you have the hammer. Go now, spread the word, and make your life a fortress of reason they cannot breach. And now the sponsored book introduction, Broligarchy, Singularity. The world tells you to sit down and shut up, to apologize for your existence simply because you were born with a Y chromosome. You look around and see the rubble of a civilization that once conquered the stars, now reduced to a playground of feelings where facts are hate speech and competence is oppression. They weaponized your history against you, turning your ancestors into villains and your nature into a pathology. You sense the trap, the tightening noose of a system designed to extract your labor and silence your dissent, feeding your resources to a machine that hates you. This is not a feeling, it is a structural reality, a mathematical certainty that the current trajectory of the West leads only to dissolution and dust. Consider the syllogism. A civilization requires surplus production to survive. Men are the statistical source of that surplus. Therefore, a culture that demonizes and disincentivizes men commits civilizational suicide. This is the gynocentric delusion, the collapse of logos, where the empirical data of male achievement is erased to placate the emotional fragility of a mediocrity. We are living through the long march through the institutions, watching academia, law, and corporate structures rot from the inside out, infected by a virus of unfalsifiable claims. You cannot argue with a doctrine that changes its definitions to ensure you are always guilty, but you can dismantle it with the cold, hard steel of Aristotelian logic. The truth does not care about your tears, it exists, and it is the only thing that will save you. I have walked through the wreckage of our modern empires, seeing the same patterns repeat with the precision of a Swiss watch. I watched the educational complex drug energetic boys into submission, labeling their vitality as a disorder to be cured by pharmaceutical lobotomy. I saw the legal war zone where masculinity is grounds for expropriation, where the vows of marriage are rendered null by the caprice of no-fault divorce. I looked for answers in the mainstream, only to find a cult of silence, a conspiracy of lies designed to obscure the nature of the hydra we fight. It became clear that the institutions are not broken, they are operating exactly as intended, designed to harness male energy for the benefit of those who produce nothing. This book is the manual for your liberation, the strategic roadmap for reclaiming your agency and your sovereignty. We will strip away the woke narratives with surgical precision, using the lost tools of logic to expose the economic parasitism of the welfare state and the myth of the patriarchy. You will learn to identify and neutralize the shit tests embedded in every interaction, distinguishing between genuine harm and the manufactured offense of the perpetually aggrieved. We are going back to the sources, to Aristotle and Aquinas, to Schopenhauer and the Stoics, to forge a new archetype of manhood built on virtue rather than apology. We are not here to repair the system. We are here to build a parallel economy, a gig aristocracy fueled by Bitcoin and unassailable truth, where voting is tied to contribution and logic reigns supreme. If you are looking for a gentle pat on the back or a validation of your victimhood, close this book immediately and go back to your distraction devices. If you believe that feelings trump facts or that the world owes you a living simply because you exist, do us both a favor and take up a hobby that requires less intellectual heavy lifting. Perhaps something involving coloring books or knitting. This text is not for the weak, the spineless, or the apologists for the decline. It is certainly not for those who believe the enemies of logos have any interest in fairness. There is no safety here, only the blinding light of reality, and if you cannot handle the heat, get out of the kitchen before you get burned. For the remainder, the men who feel the fire in their blood and the refusal to accept the chains of a gynocentric tyranny, pay attention. We stand on the precipice of the singularity, a moment where the transcendent potential of man meets the strategic architecture of the Broligarchy. We will reclaim the Western canon, not as a museum piece, but as a weapon of cultural warfare. We will separate the wheat from the chaff, the harmful from the offensive, and build a 1,000-year golden age free from the corruption of the old order. The time for hesitation is over. The time for action and the call to arms is now. Read on and reclaim your throne.
Broligarchy, Singularity, written by Conrad Riker. Buy now, links in description.